Well, I'm delighted to be here with my friend and colleague, Deborah Parker, talking about her new book, Becoming Belle de Costa Greene, a Visionary Librarian Through Her Letters. And Deborah is professor of Italian at University of Virginia, and she's held numerous offices in the field of Renaissance and medieval and Renaissance literature and studies. She's with the Dante Society of America, with the Renaissance Society of America, and she has very wide-ranging interests, not only in Renaissance studies, but also in public humanities and outreach. So thank you, Deborah, for taking the time and talking about your great new book.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be on Humanities Watch.
Thank you. So my first question is, tell us a little bit about how you became interested in Belle, in your subject.
Well, I didn't plan to write this book at all. In the fall of 2021, I was at a visiting scholar at Tatti, the Harvard Center for Italian Renaissance Studies. And the director, Alina Payne, asked me if I would film a master class. This is a new venture of Itatti's to reach out to the wider public. And the purpose is to select something in the Berenson Library of great interest that might not be well known. So since I've had a long-standing interest in Dante,
Mhm.
I looked into the volumes of Dante, especially rare editions of Dante that Berenson owned. And so my subject was Berenson, Dante, Botticelli, because he had some early editions of the first
Right.
reproductions of Botticelli's Dante illustrations.
Okay.
And while working on that topic, I learned that there was a personal component to Berenson's interest in Dante, that Dante's early work, the Vita Nuova, had
Uh-huh.
served as something like a book of love between him and Belle de Costa Greene.
Fascinating.
They referred to it often in their letters as our Dante. They saw themselves as a latter day Dante and Beatrice. And
Huh.
once I started looking into this subject, I simply couldn't stop. I knew who Belle de Costa Greene was, having read Heidi Ardizzone's biography. But once I started looking at her letters to Berenson, which roughly 600 of them, all at Itati, I really just couldn't stop.
Fascinating. And you, as a scholar, you have long studied letter writing. So I know you've written a book on Michelangelo's letters. And so I think letters are maybe a forgotten art today. And yet the way you look at these letters and investigate them in your new book and talk about what they reveal, I think is completely captivating. It's fascinating. And so can you say a few words about that? Uh, as you know, what you were discovering through the art of letter writing that Belle was practicing, Belle and Berenson.
It was a great help having written a book on Michelangelo's letters.
Mhm.
And I knew from that experience that it was very important to capture the voice of the letter writer and to identify, if possible, the distinctive features of the letter writer. And in the
Mhm.
case of Belle de Costa Greene and Berenson, we only have her letters.
Mhm.
She asked her letters to him because she destroyed all her personal papers.
Okay.
And what I try to do in the first chapter is identify what are the most distinctive features of her epistolary voice. And I also try to get a sense of what was it like to write letters in the time period in which all of this correspondence takes place, which would be from roughly 1909 to the 1940s. And earlier things that were happening, largely beginning in the Victorian period, I think seeped through and influenced how Belle wrote about herself.
Hmm.
the rise of the novel, for example, the rise of psychology as a science, and phenomena like that, I think, feed into her letter writing. And letter writing offers an opportunity for both spontaneous thoughts as well as more reflective thoughts on
Hmm.
what you're writing. And so what we get in her letters, clearer than in any body of existing information on her, is her voice. And
Mm.
because Berenson, she would confess to him subjects about her work, about the two Morgans who were her bosses, that she did not openly disclose to others, as well as a wide range of her daily activities and her thoughts about them. So I think the letters themselves are going to become available
Right.
sometime this October in
Right.
a collaborative project between Villa Itati and the Morgan Library. The title, at least as far as I understand it, is the Belle Greene Bernard Berenson Letters Project. And that will let anyone curious about Belle de Costa Greene to search through these letters in a way that just reading the letters themselves or scans of them will not allow, because one can do word searches. I haven't seen the project in action, but will allow for
Yeah.
much wider range of investigation than just reading the letters themselves.
That's so interesting. And you touch on, so what I love, one of the things I really admire in your book is that you're able to see and trace and expose how Belle connects the personal with the public, and how you talk about her self-fashioning, her self-creation over time. And she was a pioneer. She was somebody, you say, who she was of African American descent, but she passed as white. She was a woman in a very patriarchal world, and she was sort of finding her voice, a very strong and independent voice, as she was also friends and colleagues with many of the influential people in the Morgan circle, right? So,
Yes.
yeah, it's really a compelling read that you offered us. And so maybe we can reflect a little bit on the public side. Like when you and I, as humanities scholars, we recognize the need to reach out, right? To engage in outreach. And so Belle was doing that. You mentioned now also the digital project of her letters, which is another example. Can you share with us a few thoughts on how we can do that, how we can express to wider audiences the meaning, value of the humanities, of the arts and letters?
I'm gonna have to think a little bit. Let's see. If I'm going to use a different example
Okay,
to talk about that.
sure.
I'm now very close to retirement, within about 2 weeks or so. And
Wow.
I'm ending my years of teaching at UVA with a course simply directed to freshmen. And the title is Death, Hell, and Judgment. But the subject is Dante's Inferno. It's
Right.
only a 6.5-week course, and it's part of a larger program at the University of Virginia. And what I've sought to do in 6.5 weeks is, if not get them from 0 to 60 like a BMW in a few seconds, but to give them the strategies for reading a complex work like the Inferno, but not simply giving them these strategies, but that as they assimilate them, that they can absorb them into the way in which they look at works of art, literary, artistic, musical, and that they'll have these sort of in their back pocket And if they, I think many of them have assimilated these strategies, at least for reading, that will offer them a lifetime of aesthetic pleasure, of engagement with great works of art, with works of beauty. And I could go into, how I did this, but maybe that might be sufficient for now. And I think your questions have prompted me to think about this further. And that is that if we in the humanities think of long-term goals that we can give our students, and perhaps pay less attention to theoretical issues or just really ways of thinking about a work of art that don't yield a sort of long-term understanding that can carry into the future for our students, then I think we've really accomplished something. And sometimes it may be something really basic, like how to look at a work of art or different works of art, how to listen to a symphony, a sonata, and they can take these skills far beyond the completion of their degrees. And I've thought about that more as I'm teaching this course in 6 weeks than I would over maybe a semester-long Inferno course. And I feel confident that I've done that because I've been in touch with students who took the course as long as 20 years ago, because unfortunately, there's very little interest at the University of Virginia in maintaining courses on subjects such as Dante or Michelangelo. When I retire, that will be the end of the teaching of these subjects at UVA, unless administrators start thinking differently. And having written the other older students, I get letters back from them telling me just how much they remember and enjoy, have reread Dante. But another eye-opening experience was in 2021, the year of the Dante centenary. The National Gallery in Washington had a small exhibit on Dante, and I was invited to give a talk. And I basically discussed about 5 of the artworks in the exhibition. But what surprised me and the curator was they were expecting something of 20 people, but over 75 showed up. And a lot of them were older. A lot of them were senior scholars. And it's unfortunate that we never asked what attracted them, because I don't think it was my talk. But one of them said it was the literary component. And some of the people who came up, again, most of them were seniors, asked me if I knew Robert Hollander at Princeton, that they remember taking these classes. And that showed me that between my teaching 18-year-olds and meeting these seniors, how much Dante resonates. And it also prompted me to think about, what is it about the way we teach works, well, not necessarily masterpieces of world culture like Dante and Michelangelo, but what are ways in which we can inculcate long-lasting appreciation of humanistic subjects.
Well, that's a very eloquent answer, Deborah, and it's moving in your reflections on how art and literature can touch us throughout our lives, can open our eyes and our ears in ways that we didn't expect, and connect us to larger worlds and more intimately to one another. And I think your scholarship and your teaching are testimony to this. And you have given us one more gift with your book on Belle for new audiences and maybe old audiences as well. So thank you, Deborah. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us. And you and I will stay in touch And I wish you all the success with your book. And maybe before we close, just to make a mention that you will be giving more public talks on this book. We'll post links to those talks on the website. And the Morgan's having a big exhibit, right, on Belle coming up.
Yes, opening October 24th.
Oh, perfect timing. Okay. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Tim.